The author says prayer times. The scholars start by mentioning their times because that is most important. Why is that most important? Because by the time starting, all the obligations related to prayer start, such as performing purification and facing the Qibla, yani finding your Qibla, covering yourself, and anything else that's related to the prayer. The source for their timing is the book and the Sunnah. As for the book, Allah says, إن الصلاة كانت على المؤمنين كتابا موقوتا. Surely for the believers, prayer is a timed ordinance. The 2 days immediately after Mi'raj night, Gabriel descended upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, leading him in the 5 prayers at the Kaaba to teach him the timing. Because it wasn't obligatory to perform 5 prayers before the night of Al-Isra wal Mi'raj, as you know. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam performed that supreme miracle. During that night, Allah revealed to him the obligation of praying 50 prayers. Prophet Musa alayhi salatu wasalam advised him to ask for a reduction. He asked for a reduction and it was reduced to 5. I'm summarizing a lot there. And so 5 prayers became obligatory on the nation of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then the next day, Jibril came showing the Prophet the prayer times, and the day after that too. For the 2 days immediately after the Mi'raj night, Gabriel descended upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, leading him in the 5 prayers at the Kaaba to teach him the timing. Abu Dawood narrated that Ibn Abbas, may Allah accept him, and his father said that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. So now if you've learned the prayer times, then you know how they go. Here's the hadith. We went over it before, but let's look at the hadith and see what we know about the prayer times, according to Ash-Shafi'i, that is. And yani, what did Ash-Shafi'i say compared to what's in the hadith? So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam narrated or said, as Abu Dawood narrated, according to Ibn Abbas, أمني جبريل عليه السلام عند البيت مرتين. Gabriel, peace be upon him, led me at the house twice. So you know what's the house? That's the Kaaba. Twice, he means for 2 days in a row, which is what I told you already. فَصَلَّى بِي الظُّهْرَ حِينَ زَالَتِ الشَّمْسِ. He prayed Dhuhr with me when the sun declined. So the sun declined from where? You can tell us, as you know. The Prophet said, he prayed Dhuhr with me when the sun declined. Declined from where? Declined from its zenith. Yes. Okay, so there's your proof right there. Dhuhr time comes in when the sun declines from its zenith, not while the sun is at its zenith. After the sun comes out of its zenith. And why are we saying decline? Because the zenith is the highest that the sun will get. So the sun, when it moves out of its zenith, it won't go any higher. It will only go lower because the sun rises in the east and rises and rises and rises going towards the west till it gets to the center of the sky. That's its zenith. And then it won't go higher. It will only go down from there as it heads towards the western horizon. He said, وَكَانَتْ قَدْرَ الشِّرَاكِ. And the shadow was the amount of a sandal strap. Now, as you know, at zenith time, you're going to measure any shadow, the shadow of any object. You want to measure the object and the shadow too of the object at zenith time before Dhuhr comes in. That moment before Dhuhr comes in. You want to see how long the object is, how long the shadow, the zenith shadow is, and you add those two numbers together, you know that when the shadow gets as long as those two numbers, whatever those two numbers add up to, when the shadow gets that long, Dhuhr goes out and Asr comes in. Here, the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he mentioned the length of the shadow. He said, and the shadow was the amount of a sandal strap. وَصَلَّى بِيَ الْعَصْرَ حِينَ كَانَ ظِلُّهُ مِثْلَهُ. And he prayed Asr with me when its shadow was as long as what casts it. So what did we learn? We learned that Asr comes in. Who can tell us? You're quick on the draw with the typing. What's the rule for when Asr comes in Shafi'i school? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. Zenith plus the shadow of the object. Okay, I'll accept that. What did you say, Hajj? When the shadow of the object is equal to the length of the shadow and the zenith, or the shadow of the zenith, plus the length of the object. Correct. All right, so where is that here in this hadith? He says, وَصَلَّى بِيَ الْعَصْرَ حِينَ كَانَ ظِلُّهُ مِثْلَهُ. He prayed Asr with me when its shadow was as long as what casts it. So it looks like it's saying that Asr time comes in when the shadow is as long as whatever casts the shadow, is as long as the object that casts the shadow. But what did Ash-Shafi'i say? He said, Asr comes in when the shadow is as long as the object plus the length that the object had when the sun was at its zenith. Yes, and that's these two sentences here. Both of those. That's how Shafi'i got his judgment there. وَكَانَتْ قَدْرَ الشِّرَاكِ. So the shadow is already as long as a sandal strap. Now add to that the shadow was as long as the object. So if the shadow was as long as the object, plus the length that the shadow had when the sun was at its zenith, which was the sandal strap. So the shadow was the amount of a sandal strap before. But then he prayed Asr, the Prophet said, he prayed Asr with me when its shadow was as long as what casts it, meaning after that sandal strap. So the shadow is as long as what casts it, plus the sandal strap that was mentioned there. It wasn't mentioned for no reason, so it's regarded. So Asr then comes in when the shadow is as long as whatever casts the shadow, plus the length that the shadow had when the sun was at its zenith. He said, وَصَلَّى بِيَ الْمَغْرِبَ حِينَ أَفْطَرَ الصَّائِمُ. And he prayed Maghrib with me when the fasting person breaks fast. When's that? When the sun goes down. So you know that one already. Maghrib comes in when the disk of the sun is completely below the horizon. That's when the fasting person breaks his fast. وَصَلَّى بِيَ الْعِشَاءِ حِينَ غَابَ الشَّفَقُ. And he prayed Isha with me when the twilight set. That's the redness of the western horizon according to Ash-Shafi'i. The shafaq, according to Ash-Shafi'i, is the red light. وَصَلَّى بِيَ الْفَجْرَ حِينَ حَرُمَ الطَّعَامُ وَالشَّرَابُ عَلَى الصَّائِمِ. He prayed Fajr with me when food and drink is forbidden on the fasting person. So, all what we read so far, Jibril showed the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam when the prayer times start. He prayed Dhuhr with me when the sun declined out of its zenith. That's the beginning of Dhuhr time. The Prophet made a note for us that the shadow at zenith time was the amount of the sandal strap. Then he prayed also with the Prophet when the shadow was as long as the object casting the shadow, plus the sandal strap. That's the beginning of Asr. Then he prayed Maghrib with him when the fasting person breaks his fast. So that's Maghrib. Here, the intended meaning is at the beginning of the time. Then he prayed Isha with the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam when the twilight set. So that's the beginning of the time. And then he prayed Fajr with the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam when food and drink is forbidden on the fasting person. That's the beginning of the time. Now, really, except for the Fajr here, all of this proves the end of the times too. Because Dhuhr time ends when Asr comes in. So he told us when Asr comes in, then we know when Dhuhr time ends. And Maghrib, Asr ends when Maghrib comes in. So that's the beginning and the ending time. And Maghrib ends when Isha comes in. So that's beginning and ending time. And Isha ends when Fajr comes in. So that's prayer times, beginning and end. So what happened on the second day? The Prophet ﷺ said, فَلَمَّا كَانَ الْغَدِ Then the next day, صَلَّى بِيَ الظُّهْرَ حِينَ كَانَ ظِلُّهُ مِثْلَهُ He finished praying Dhuhr with me by the time the shadow was as long as what casts it. So here we have in parentheses, finish praying for clarity, or else someone might get confused here. If you take that out, you'd say, then the next day he prayed Dhuhr with me when the shadow was as long as what casts it. So it looks like it's saying, he prayed Dhuhr with me when Asr time came in. And that's not the intended meaning here. The intended meaning is that he prayed Dhuhr with the Prophet ﷺ on the second day, all the way at the end of Dhuhr time. So that he finished praying Dhuhr with the Prophet ﷺ by the time Asr came in. So he said the next day and the intended meaning here is, he finished praying Dhuhr with me by the time the shadow was as long as what casts it. Why would he do that? As we're going to see, that's to teach the Prophet ﷺ that delaying Dhuhr is not disliked. You can delay praying Dhuhr all the way until, if you say Assalamu alaikum, Dhuhr time goes out. So you need to be able to start it. You need to be able to finish your Dhuhr in the whole time. But if you delayed Dhuhr such that you said Allahu Akbar to start your Dhuhr, and by the time you said Assalamu alaikum, Dhuhr time is out, and your prayer did not spill over into the next prayer time, this is not disliked. So that's the meaning here. فَلَمَّا كَانَ الْغَدِ Then the next day, صَلَّى بِيَ الظُّهْرَ حِينَ كَانَ ظِلُّهُ مِثْلَهُ He finished praying Dhuhr with me by the time the shadow was as long as what casts it. وَصَلَّى بِيَ الْعَصْرَ حِينَ كَانَ ظِلُّهُ مِثْلَيْهِ And he prayed Asr with me when the shadow was double that. So it means he prayed Asr with the Prophet ﷺ not right at the beginning of the time, but after that. After Asr time came in, and it was already in for some time, to the extent that the shadow got twice as long as the object. Then he prayed Asr with the Prophet ﷺ. So that tells us that Asr is not to be delayed like Dhuhr could be delayed. We have more details coming. وَصَلَّى بِيَ الْمَغْرِبَ حِينَ أَفْطَرَ الصَّائِمُ And he prayed Maghrib with me when the fasting person breaks his fast. So he did the same thing for Maghrib on 2 days. As soon as Maghrib came in, they prayed. He didn't delay the Maghrib. So then that's a proof that Maghrib is like one block of time that shouldn't be delayed. وَصَلَّى بِيَ الْعِشَاءَ إِلَى ثُلُثِ اللَّيْلِ, and he prayed Isha with me by the third of the night. So also he didn't delay praying Isha with the Prophet all the way to the end of the time, like what happened at Dhuhr time. وَصَلَّى بِيَ الْفَجْرَ بِأَسْفَارٍ, and he prayed Fajr with me at daylight. So also the second day he prayed Fajr with the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, not exactly at the beginning of the time, but not all the way at the end of the time too. So none of those prayers, he prayed it all the way at the end of the time like he did Dhuhr. ثُمَّ الْتَفَتَ إِلَيْهِ ثُمَّ الْتَفَتَ إِلَيْهِ, then he turned to me. The Prophet said, then Gabriel turned to me. فَقَالَ, and he said, يَا Muhammad, O Muhammad, هَذَا وَقْتُ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ مِنْ قَبْلِكَ, this is the timing of the prophets prior to you. وَالْوَقْتُ مَا بَيْنَ هَذَيْنِ الْوَقْتَيْنِ, and the preferred time is what is between these two times. So it means the preferred time to pray each of the 5 prayers is like how Gabriel did. So you could pray starting right at the beginning of the time like you did the first day, or you could delay praying right at the beginning of the time, but by the time Gabriel started praying on the second day. Better not to delay your prayer more than that. Not haram though, in the Shafi'i schools, not haram. And like we said, when it came to Dhuhr, he taught us that this prayer can be delayed all the way until the end of its time without dislikeness. Delaying Dhuhr time is not disliked, or delaying Dhuhr prayer is not disliked. MashaAllah. So if you're teaching a new Muslim the prayer times, you're going to go through it like this? No, you're not going to go through it like this. Just going to teach him. Just teach him the basic prayer times. The Prophet ﷺ said that the best deed is as-salatu fi awwali waqtiha, prayer at the beginning of its time. So that's the best time to pray any prayer, at the beginning of its time. Except according to Abu Hanifa, it's better to delay your Fajr. According to Ash-Shafi'i, this includes Fajr prayer. As-salatu fi awwali waqtiha, praying all the 5 prayers at the beginning of their times is best, is absolutely the best, according to Ash-Shafi'i. And Abu Hanifa has a saying about Fajr here, that it's better actually for Fajr for you to wait a little bit, for the light to spread a little bit, and then pray Fajr. Knowledge of the entry and exit times is a personal obligation. That's clear. Commencement of a prayer's time is a condition for its validity. Yani, for the prayer's time to come in, that's a condition for the prayer to be valid in the first place. For the prayer's time to come in is a condition for the prayer to be valid in the first place. Is that absolutely true statement? Because I could pray, if I'm a traveler, Asr at Dhuhr time. So is that a correct statement always? The commencement of a prayer's time is a condition for its validity. Is that true always? Yani, if I prayed Asr at Dhuhr time because I'm a traveler, or because of rain, then is that sentence still true? So the answer is yes, it's still true, because Dhuhr is a time for Asr when the conditions permit. And Maghrib is a time for Isha when the conditions permit. So then that sentence is true. Commencement of a prayer's time is a condition for its validity. And by the commencement of the prayer's time, all related matters start, like we already said. Like purification, covering, and turning to face the Qibla. Knowing that a prayer's time set in by personal observation is a condition not mentioned by Abu Shuja'. Uh, so yes, in the book of obligatory knowledge, we learned that, we learned in the section of additional conditions of prayer, that among the conditions of prayer is knowing that the prayer's time set in. And this condition is lacking in the ultimate summary of Abu Shuja'. So knowing that a prayer's time set in by personal observation is a condition that's not mentioned by Abu Shuja', and sufficient as well. So it's not limited to personal observation. It's not limited to that. Sufficient as well is confidence about it being in. Being confident that the prayer time is in. If you're following the lessons we're doing on what's knowledge and what's ignorance and what's confidence and what's skepticism and what's doubt, then this should be clear for you what this means. Sufficient to pray for the prayer to be valid is confidence about the time being in. So confidence means less than knowledge. Confidence means you could be wrong, actually, but you don't think you are. Confidence about the prayer time being in. What would make you confident, which is less than knowledge? A reliable clue, like a timed habit. A timed habit. What does that mean? It means, for example, you pray Dhuhr or you pray Maghrib. And then after you pray Maghrib, you habitually do something. There's something you do habitually after you pray Maghrib. By the time you finish doing that, Isha is in. Normally, it's reliable for you. It's tested for you. And so one day you prayed Maghrib, you did what you normally do after Maghrib, and then you prayed Isha. This is valid. Because you're confident that the time is in based on a reliable clue. Or a rooster, meaning here a tested rooster, not a rooster you don't know. A tested rooster, a reliable rooster, a rooster that's basically like an alarm clock, goes off at the same time every day. So you can rely on that and pray because you're confident that the time is in. A reliable reporter telling you of his observation supersedes your own ijtihad, like for the Qibla. Huh? What does that mean? Okay, so a reliable reporter, that means someone who's telling you, someone who came to you. He said, Assalamu alaikum. I saw the sun go down, for example, or I saw the sun is still up, for example, with my own eyes. So this one who's reporting this to you, he's telling you this. He's a reliable reporter. So he's telling you of his own observation. And let's say you made ijtihad. So your ijtihad is that the sun went down and you were ready to pray Maghrib. And then he said, and he's a reliable one telling you, I saw the tip of the sun still up. It's not down yet. So now what do you go by? Do you go by your own ijtihad? When you made an ijtihad to deduce that the time is in, and you arrived at the time being in. And then this reliable reporter, he informs you of his observation, which is contrary to your ijtihad. So what do? A reliable reporter telling you of his observation supersedes your ijtihad. It's stronger than your ijtihad. So then you'll go by that reliable reporter. Like for the Qibla, meaning you made an ijtihad for the Qibla because you can't see the Kaaba. And then a reliable reporter tells you of his observation. He says, I see the Kaaba and it's like this, not like what you do. I can see it. I have climbed the wall and I see it. And you're off. It's not like you, it's like this, like me. And he's a reliable reporter. So what do? You take by your own determination or you take by his observation? His observation along with being reliable. His observation, along with being reliable, supersedes your ijtihad. So you abandon your ijtihad here and you take his word for it. So we're not talking about you abandon your ijtihad for his ijtihad. No. You abandon your ijtihad for his observation, along with being a reliable reporter. Because observation is not ijtihad. If you, with your eyes, saw the sun go down, you don't say, I made ijtihad and I saw the sun go down, so Maghrib's in. This is wrong application of the word here. The sun going down is definitive evidence for you that Maghrib is in. So there's no ijtihad in the face of definitive evidence. There's no ijtihad in the face of definitive evidence. Would a mujtahid make ijtihad about a rule when there's an ayah that already gives the rule, or there's an authentic hadith that already gives the rule? No. He abandons his ijtihad for the evidence. Ijtihad is what you do when you don't have definitive evidence. And observation is definitive evidence. If your senses are sound, observation will be a definitive evidence. You don't make ijtihad in the face of definitive evidence. So now the case is that it's not your observation, it's someone else's observation, and you made ijtihad because you didn't have any definitive evidence. But when this was a reliable person who has an observation, that was by itself, or those two things together if you want, those are stronger than your ijtihad, so you go by that. If you have any question, go ahead and ask me, please. A reliable mu'adhin who calls the adhan after observation is also sufficient. Reliable mu'adhin. No one should take from an unreliable caller, an unreliable mu'adhin. Otherwise, if you don't have a reliable reporter, you don't have observation, you don't have a reliable mu'adhin, then ijtihad is an instructed directive. That means you're obligated to make ijtihad for the prayer time. Praying without it is then invalid, because that's what's going to make you know the prayer time is in. So if you don't do it, you don't know, you don't think the prayer time is in. You don't have any reason to be confident that the prayer time is in, so you can't pray. And if you did, your prayer wouldn't be valid. Even if it were done on time, your prayer wouldn't be valid, because you didn't do what makes you confident that the time is in. As well as praying before obtaining confidence. Even if you were making ijtihad and you weren't confident that this is the best, most accurate direction, you weren't confident. Before you obtained confidence, you stopped your investigation to pray in a direction that's not your strongest confidence. Your prayer is invalid. Now, if one confidently prayed, but he prayed ahead of time, so he was confident that the time was in and he was wrong, in other words. The time actually didn't come in yet. Then he must repeat his prayer according to the school, because it wasn't valid really. And if he prayed confidently, he was confident that he prayed on time, and it happened that actually he prayed late. The time was out, and he thought the time was in. So he was confident that he was not being negligent. It wasn't that he wasted his time and he played around, he goofed around until the time went out. No. Rather, he made an ijtihad and he was confident that the time is in, but really it was out. So if he prayed like that, his prayer is valid because the time came in, which that's the condition. That's what we said here. Commencement of a prayer's time is a condition for its validity. So here, if he prayed late, thinking that he's praying on time, and when we say he thinks he prayed on time, means he didn't make the intention for a makeup prayer. So this person prayed late without an intention to pray a makeup prayer. Is his prayer valid? It is valid. His prayer is valid, though he intended a current prayer, not a makeup prayer. If no discrepancy appears, his prayer is fulfilled, meaning if he doesn't discover any invalidator or anything like that, anything that prevents his prayer from initiating, or he didn't commit any invalidator, his prayer is fulfilled, although he didn't intend to make up prayer, because the condition is fulfilled, which is the commencement of the prayer's time. The time came in, so this basically, the time coming in unlocks the prayer for you. Even after the time goes out, that prayer has been unlocked for you. Now it's accessible to you. So you just pray it. Pray it on time. Don't pray it late. But even if you prayed it late, it's valid because it has been unlocked for you. The time came in. If one is unable to perform ijtihad like a blind man, he mimics a reliable person. We talk about the prayer time here, not the qibla. Each prayer is mandatory from the beginning of its meritorious time. Meritorious time is the very beginning of the prayer time for each one of the 5 prayers according to the Shafi'i school. Yani, if you make purification ahead of time and then you just sit and wait for the time to come in, if a person made purification ahead of time and then just sat and waited for the prayer time to start, and then as soon as the prayer time came in, he prayed that prayer. Like when we say as soon as it came in means as soon as it was verified for him. Soon as he was confident or sure that the time was in, he prayed immediately. Then he caught the meritorious time. And even if this prayer has sunnah prayers that go before it, if a person made purification ahead of time, yani, if you were allowed to, there's the case of a person with incontinence who can't make purification ahead of time. But if a person could make purification ahead of time, and so he did so, and then he waited for the time to come in. Why is he waiting? He's waiting not for the bus, he's waiting for the prayer time. So he's waiting, he's timing it, he's counting the seconds down. Soon as the prayer time comes in, let's say this prayer has sunnahs that go before it. If he stands up immediately, starts doing the sunnahs that come before this prayer, and then he did that prayer, he got the meritorious time of praying as soon as the prayer time came in. Even if there's sunnah prayers before it, like dhuhr. As you know, it's recommended to pray 2 before dhuhr with a salam, and then 2 more before dhuhr with a salam. So it's recommended to pray a total of 4 rak'ats before dhuhr, 4 rak'ats with 2 salams. So if a person just waited for being sure dhuhr was in or confident, soon as he was sure or confident, he stood up and prayed those 4 with the 2 salams, and then prayed dhuhr. Then this person got the meritorious time of dhuhr. Then this person got the meritorious time of dhuhr. And even if he didn't pray those sunnah prayers, he just immediately stood up and prayed dhuhr. Then he caught the meritorious time of dhuhr, or any of the other obligatory prayers. So each prayer is mandatory from the beginning of its meritorious time, including preparation for prayer. Yani, if as soon as the time came in, he started preparing for prayer. I gave you example. I said the person was ready ahead of time. But even if he wasn't ready ahead of time, and as soon as the time came in, he started preparing for prayer, like wudu and covering. Then he caught the prayer at its meritorious time. And when we say he started at the beginning of the time getting ready, then we're talking here also about average speed, not rushing and not being slow. Then this person caught the meritorious time. And prayer has an extended or a prolonged obligation, lasting until a time that can contain the entire prayer. So how long do you have to perform a prayer once its time comes in? You have as long as you can fit the entire prayer in its time. Like what we said about Dhuhr, that if you waited all the way till the end of Dhuhr time and then started at a time that enables you to say Salam before Asr comes in, like right before Asr comes in, then this is valid. This is the obligation for all prayers. Yani, the prayer time is an extended or a prolonged obligation. Starting with enough time, but praying over time is not sinful. Starting with enough time to finish the prayer in its time. But then praying over time, meaning you extended the prayer until it spilled over until the next prayer time, or spilled over outside of its own prayer time. This is not haram. What would be sinful is to delay the prayer until you cannot fit the entire prayer in its time. Delaying prayer with the firm intention to perform it on time, which is obligatory, yani, you're not obligated to pray the prayer as soon as the time comes in. You're not obligated to pray the prayer as soon as the time comes in. So if you choose to not pray the prayer as soon as the time comes in, then it's obligatory on you to decide to pray before the time goes out. You have to have the decision, if you're not going to pray as soon as the time comes in, that you're going to pray before the time goes out. That's obligatory. That decision is obligatory. Delaying prayer with the firm intention to perform it on time, which that's obligatory, having that firm intention to pray it on time, but then dying before the time goes out is not sinful. So that's answer to a question. What if a person, since this is an extended obligation, since the prayer time is an extended or a prolonged obligation, what if the person decided to not pray at the very beginning of the time and then he died before the time goes out? Is he sinful? He's not sinful, but he has to have had a firm decision that he was going to pray before the time goes out. And Al-Basir, he's one of the explainers of Abu Shuja'. And his book is one of the books that makes what we're reading here very nice. He said, this is if he thought that he would be able to do it. This is if he thought that he would be able to do it. Meaning, a person didn't pray the prayer as soon as the time came in, and he had the firm intention to pray it before it goes out, and he thought that he would be able to do that, and then he died before the time went out. He's not sinful. Yani, he died before the time went out and he didn't pray. Then he's not sinful. As opposed to the Hajj. Hajj has different judgment. Which is, once you're able to perform the Hajj, then you're obligated to perform it. And according to Ash-Shafi'i, you can delay it, but you have to do it before you die. And if you die without doing it, a major sin will be written on you. So that's different from, this case of Hajj is different from what we're saying about the prayer time. And delaying the prayer until the remaining time cannot contain the entire prayer is forbidden. We already said that. But being able to fit a single rak'ah inside the time. So you delayed, and if you start now, You can't fit the entire prayer inside its time. It's going to spill over, but you can fit at least one rak'ah of this prayer inside its time. Then this is considered as a prayer done on time. It's not a make-up prayer. That's still haram to do it though. This scenario we're describing now is haram, but it's not counted as a make-up prayer because of the hadith. Man adraka rak'atan min as-subh. Man adraka rak'atan min as-subh qabla an tatlu'a ash-shams. Whoever catches a rak'at of subh, that's Fajr prayer, before sunrise, faqad adraka as-subh, then he caught subh prayer, Fajr prayer. ومن أدرك ركعة من العصر قبل أن تغرب الشمس, and whoever caught a rakat of Asr before the sunset, فقد أدرك العصر, he caught Asr. And comprehend furthermore what the majority said, that outside of the sacred territory of Mecca, outside of the Haram of Mecca, Yani, I'm about to tell you a rule that it doesn't apply to the Haram of Mecca. The Haram of Mecca has its own, yani, doesn't apply to the rule I'm going to tell you right now. There are 5 times and not 3 in which it is disliked to pray without a reason. But we're not going to read that now.